who reset the pins before machines took over. Imagine bowling in 1940. Before the hum of modern machines, there was a real person hiding behind those pins. Usually it was just a kid, maybe 14 or even younger, waiting in the dark pit now. He sat on a narrow wooden plank with his legs dangling, just inches away from the impact zone. He watched and waited for a heavy ball to come flying down the lane toward him at a very high speed too. If he didn't pay attention, he'd learn a painful lesson very quickly. These young workers were known as pin boys. If you visited an American alley before the mid-50s, one was there for you then. They were the invisible backbone of the sport, clearing wood and resetting the formation by hand. But by the late 50s, they were gone, phased out by the arrival of the automatic pinsetter tech. A job that once employed tens of thousands of young people across the country vanished almost overnight. It sounds like a tiny footnote in history, but for many, it was a defining first job indeed. Picture a bowling alley in the 1930s. These weren't the neon-lit family centers we see today. They were often tucked into dark basements or the back of old buildings, lit only by bare light bulbs now. The air was thick with the scent of machine oil, stale cigarette smoke, and fresh lacquer. The floors were worn, and the sound of the place was a constant, low thunder that rattled your bones daily. You'd hear the heavy balls rolling, the sharp crack of pins, and the voices of men echoing off hard walls. Behind those lanes, separated by the pit, was the small world where the pin boys lived then. It was a fast-paced and chaotic environment with absolutely no room for a mistake. Each pin weighed about 3.5 pounds, and they flew like projectiles when hit by a powerful strike fast. A busy worker might handle 2 lanes at once, jumping back and forth between the pits without a break. The balls kept coming whether he was ready or not. He had to be faster than the bowler always. A pin could fly back hard enough to leave a massive bruise or catch a knee at a terrible angle. Even a ball that hit the gutter could bounce into the pit while a kid was still clearing the deck too. The most experienced boys learned to read the lane perfectly. They could predict where the pins would scatter just by the sound of the roll. They moved with a speed that seemed almost superhuman now. New kids, however, usually learned the hard way. One slow move meant a painful hit. Most of these boys were between 12 and 17 years old, looking to earn their own way in the big world then. In big cities, you often saw kids from immigrant families or tough working-class neighborhoods. They took the job because the money was real and the hours worked around their school schedules well. In smaller farm towns, it was the kids who needed cash for something specific. Maybe they wanted a new bicycle, a sturdy pair of shoes, or they were saving up for their very first used car eventually. The pay wasn't hourly, it was per game. In the 1930s, a boy might earn 5 to 10 cents per game. It sounds like pennies today, but back then it really added up during a busy Saturday night often. A kid working 2 lanes through a crowded evening could take home $1 or $2. For a teenager in that era, that was genuine wealth. It meant independence and a sense of true responsibility then. This job had its own unique culture and hierarchy. The pin boys knew the regulars better than anyone. They knew who was a serious pro and who was just there to drink a few beers with friends daily. A generous bowler knew to tip the kid in the back. The best pin boys could spot a spare setup instantly. They had the pins reset so fast that the bowler barely had to pause their rhythm at all ever. They worked incredibly hard to never slow down the flow of the frame. By the 1940s, bowling had become one of the most popular activities in America, with millions of people joining leagues yearly. From factory workers to veterans and church groups, everyone was hitting the lanes. The demand was massive, and every single lane in the country required a human being to make the game work always. In a large urban alley with 30 lanes, you'd have 30 kids working on a single night. They were managed by a strict foreman who kept everything running on a very tight and loud schedule daily. But there was a major problem for the owners: labor. Human labor is expensive and sometimes unreliable. Relying on a crew of teenagers meant dealing with constant turnover and inconsistency daily. Many alleys paid these boys off the books to keep costs low, but kids still aged out or moved on to better jobs. On slow nights, you paid them to sit. On busy nights, you never had enough of them then. Owners realized the pin boy was a bottleneck. It wasn't that the kids weren't good at the job, it was just that humans can only move so fast. They needed a mechanical solution to the problem fast. Experiments with mechanical pinsetters actually dated back to the early 1900s. Various inventors tried to build a machine that could clear the deck and reset the pins without human assistance now. Most of those early designs were way too complicated. They were unreliable, expensive, and broke down constantly. Handling pins that scattered differently every time was a tough puzzle to solve then. The mechanical tolerances required were insane. Finally, the American Machine and Foundry Company, or AMF, stepped in. They bought the key patents from an inventor named Gottfried Schmidt quickly. AMF spent years refining the technology behind the scenes. Their big breakthrough, the pinspotter, was shown to the public for the first time in 1946 during a major tournament held in Buffalo City. It wasn't quite ready for the big leagues yet, so they set it up in a separate building. It took until 1951 to test a full installation of 12 lanes in a center in Mount Clemens, Michigan State. That was the first bowling center to ever operate entirely without pin boys. By 1952, the machine entered full production. Soon after, Brunswick launched their own competing machine in 1956 finally. By the early 1960s, almost every lane in America had switched to automatic pinsetters. It cost several $1,000s per lane to install, which was a massive investment for the alley owners too. But the math made sense. It eliminated the cost of wages and the liability of having kids in the pit. Alleys could stay open later without worrying about finding a crew to work the late shifts ever. Most importantly, the machines were consistent. They could keep pace with any bowler on any night forever. They didn't get tired, they didn't need breaks, and they never asked for a raise at all. For a large alley, the machines paid for themselves in just a few years. Through the mid-50s, the transition happened fast. One by one, the alleys replaced their human workers with steel now. By the end of the decade, the classic pin boy was gone from the American scene. Most of the kids had already grown up or found other work. The ones left found it harder and harder to get hired then. The alleys became quieter behind the scenes, run by fewer staff and staying open for much longer hours. The huge bowling boom of the 60s was actually fueled by this very leap in technology now. Alleys could expand and build more lanes because they weren't limited by the number of kids they could manage. The sport became more accessible to everyone and the game changed forever for us all. If you bowled in the late 40s, you probably remember that short wait. You remember the sound of a kid gathering the wood and the glimpse of legs swinging over the dark pit after a strike today. You might have tipped the boy without thinking much about it. It was just another part of the evening, like tipping a car hop. It was a small thanks to the person keeping your game in motion always. The pin boy saw your best games and your worst gutters. He was a witness to millions of personal victories and defeats. He was the human element in a game that has since become purely mechanical. Thinking back on it now, it feels like a lost world. The grit, the noise, and the sheer physical effort required just to play a game of bowling are things we rarely consider in our modern life now. Today, we push a button and expect everything to work perfectly. But once there was a kid with a sore back and quick reflexes making it happen. That history is a vital part of the American story. It shows how technology reshapes our lives and the way we work. Thousands of first jobs vanished, replaced by gears and motors. It is a story of progress, but also one of a lost connection often. If this story brought back a memory for you, please like the video. It helps others discover these forgotten pieces of history. We want to keep sharing the tales of the jobs that built our world. If you want more stories about the everyday routines and places that shaped mid-century life, hit the subscribe button. We have plenty more deep dives into the way things used to be coming soon too. Did you ever set pins yourself? Or maybe you knew someone who spent their nights in the pit? We would love to hear your stories in the comments. Your memories keep this history alive for us all now. The pin boy might be gone, but the echoes of those crashing pins remain. Every time you step up to the lane today, remember the kids who sat in the shadows, waiting for your ball to come flying fast. They were the unsung heroes of the alley, moving fast and staying sharp in a world of flying wood and heavy rubber. Their legacy lives on in every strike and spare we celebrate in the modern age now.